Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Trump Trolls Trump. The show where one person with a certain last name ridicules relentlessly, mercilessly, and deservedly another name who just so happens to have the same last name. I will leave it to you to figure out which person is which. It is now day 159 of that extraordinarily golden age we were promised. And we are here to take a look back at week 22. What a week it was. Although we could say that every single week, couldn't we? Now, the Trump regime loves free speech. They just love it. They love it almost as much as Donald likes Diet Coke and Big Macs. They're always going on about how the First Amendment is under attack and it should be defended at all costs. Not the part about freedom of assembly, not that. Um, Not the part about the free press. No, no, no. Free speech. That's the thing they claim to be so completely excited about. I mean, we agree with them. We here at Marriage Trump Media agree. Free speech is incredibly important and must be defended at all costs. Well, does it seem to be alive and well in the nation's capital in the way that Donald would like? Let's take a look at this report from DC News now.
This was a scene at the National Mall, a mysterious statue there. It shows a gold thumb crushing the Statue of Liberty. The documents from the National Park Service say the statue will call attention to imagery from oppressive regimes. The display comes just months after a giant bronze poop statue popped up also on the National Mall. That one, they say, was honoring those involved in the January 6th insurrection. That was followed by many poop statues and postcards.
Well, that's the kind of free speech Donald Trump can get behind, right? Yeah, probably not. But it's happened again. The White House is quote unquote fuming over a mysterious new art installation that appeared this week. This time, it's a gold TV looping footage of Donald dancing with convicted sex offender and formerly very good friend of his, Jeffrey Epstein. Press aide Abigail Jackson blasted the creator, saying, quote, "Wow, these liberal activists masquerading as artists are dumber than I thought," unquote. The 15-second loop also features a plaque quoting the White House's own defense of free expression. Quote, "In the United States, you have the freedom to display your so-called art, no matter how ugly it is," unquote. Well, if there's anything Donald knows anything about, it's ugliness. So you shouldn't have a problem with this at all, right? In fact, I think we need more. So let's take Donald and his White House at their words. They love free speech. They love expressions of free speech in the form of art that mocks him just as we do. So bring it on. All right. In more news, we started out the week with Donald's Middle Eastern midnight bombing raid and a risky gamble that put the entire world in danger of a larger conflict. The so-called No New Wars president, remember, Donald campaigned relentlessly in all three of his campaigns against war and the promised end forever wars. But he's busy with war plans these days and cannot seem to broker a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, even though he promised to do so on day one after the election. Apparently, and who would have known? It's a little more complicated than he thought. This week, he also claimed to have solved the conflict between Pakistan and India, even though both countries have publicly stated they have absolutely no knowledge of anything of the sort. That's so weird. He couldn't possibly be lying about that or taking credit he doesn't deserve, could he? So, the guy who promised no war to end all forever wars is bombing Iran in order to help out his ally Benjamin Netanyahu. He's continuing to kowtow to Putin by completely fucking up any kind of deal to be had that would restore Ukrainian territory that's been stolen from it violently and illegally by Russia. And he's lied about brokering non-existent peace deals. Obviously, this type of behavior it deserves some kind of response, but what kind of response do you think this kind of behavior should receive? Well, if you guessed getting the Nobel Peace Prize, you're way ahead of the game. Take a look how Fox Day TV sees all of this.
I think we're going to see the fruits of this decision tonight play out for many, many years to come. And if the Nobel Peace Prize were worth anything anymore, I would say the president certainly deserves one.
President Trump is going to win the Nobel Peace Prize, no doubt. Rather than World War III, we may get more peace. And rather than 34 felony counts, President Trump may end up with 34 Nobel Peace Prizes.
Why are those people allowed to wear crosses? But sure. If anything should qualify you for a Nobel Peace Prize, it is bombing another country. That, by the way, I'm being sarcastic because that would set a very alarming precedent. On Monday, a senior Ukrainian politician pulled his Nobel Peace Prize nomination for Donald, saying he doesn't think that Donald can help end the war between Ukraine and Russia anymore. That would be Alexander Mareshko, who leads Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee. And he told Newsweek he's, quote, lost any sort of faith and belief, unquote, in Donald's ability to make peace happen. You actually believe those things in the first place? That's depressing, actually. To be in Ukraine and see what Donald Trump has done to make things worse for Ukraine and have it take so long to come to the conclusion that maybe Donald isn't really going to bring peace to your nation is, well, let's put it this way. Mareshko should not ever get the Nobel Peace Prize. But of course, neither should Donald. And that should go without saying, but he is not going to stop trying, which worries me because if he thinks that bombing Iran is the thing that made him most eligible, I fear for other countries. Speaking of unnecessary wars, it has now been 76 days since Donald declared Liberation Day and started an unwarranted trade war against the world. Not just unwarranted, but unprovoked and unilateral. White House economic advisor Peter Navarro told us that we'd have 90 deals in 90 days. So as always, we want to keep you posted to see how it's going because Donald, as you may have heard, is a legendary deal maker. So 90 deals in 90 days, that sounds like a no-brainer. That sounds like something he could do with both hands tied behind his back, blindfolded and gagged. Anyway, we're on day 76. So we should be 76 deals in. How many do we have? I'm not sure if Donald can count this high, but I'll help him out. We have one deal. So let's check in with Scott Bessent to see if he's going to tell the truth about where we stand. Roll the clip.
Is the next country we should expect a trade deal to do with the United States? Are you going to be able to get some deal announcements beyond just the UK before this August deadline where we're going to hear from the Court of International Appeals?
Maria, you know, with all things, they get done at the end. You have to put on a deadline. You know, as you and I know, nothing gets done in Washington well in advance. So I think a lot of the countries are feeling pressure. We have countries approaching us with very good deals. We have 18 important trading partners. You know, UK, China, they are behind us for now. Are behind us. And then Secretary Lutnick said yesterday that he expects 10 more deals. So, you know, if we can ink 10 or 12 of the important 18, you know, there are another important 20 relationships, then I think we could have trade wrapped up by Labor Day.
Okay, I have a little advice here. If 90 days isn't long enough to get 90 deals, then maybe you should have made the deadline further into the future. That's one. Also, 12 and 18 deals, that's not 90. So you guys have a lot of work to do, but we have complete faith. Well, no, we don't. We have no faith in you whatsoever. So let's move on to health news, because Donald has picked the best person on the planet to make sure that Americans get as sick and dead as possible. This week, the nation's top health official, a man who bathes in raw sewage, that would be with his grandchildren. I think it's important to point that out. Robert Kennedy spoke before the House of Representatives Committee on Energy and Commerce Subcommittee. He said that he plans to launch an advertising campaign to encourage Americans to adopt wearable devices, such as those that measure blood glucose levels and other health metrics. Something like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch that not only can pinpoint your exact location, but can also monitor your heart rate when you're being chased by immigration and customs enforcement, or worse, taunted by Nazi Tom Homan, or even worse, have cosplayer Christy Nome threaten to murder your puppy. That kind of wearable device. That sounds like something all of us should want. Kennedy told the committee, quote, "We think that wearables are a key to the MAHA agenda. My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years," unquote. Well, wearing a wearable sounds like a reasonable thing to do, of course, if your fondest hope in life is to have every single move you make tracked by a fascist regime. Sign me up. Oh, wait, I probably already have been signed up without even knowing it. There's more, though. Kennedy also has plans for your children's teeth. Take a look.
The issue of fluoride, Secretary, what has been the response from dentists in America who may be concerned that some children in lower incomes in particular don't get those regular dental preventative type situations where they can go in and get their teeth more indemnified and treated against cavities?
Well, people will still get indemnified for it to the extent that they're already indemnified. But, it is an issue. It's a balance. You're going to see probably slightly more cavities.
Okay. In other words, I, Robert Kennedy, am not going to answer that perfectly reasonable question. Why? Because dentists think he's insane. There might be more cavities. Yeah, there might be more cavities if we remove fluoride from drinking water, which, as we know, prevents cavities. And by the way, the amount of fluoride in drinking water is so minuscule that it has no negative effects on children at all. You know what does have negative effects on children? Getting cavities that don't get treated, because it is extraordinarily expensive to get dental care in this country. Having those cavities get worse, having infections get into the child's bloodstream and go to the brain. That is bad. So that doesn't scream MAHA to me. But what do I know? I am not an environmental attorney. Before we get to our last segment, please take a second to like and share this video. It really helps people find us. Also, we're getting very close to our goal of 500,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks. This week, Norwegian tourist Mads Mikkelsen arrived at Newark Airport ready to embark on his summer vacation in the United States. But soon after, things went wrong at customs and he was pulled aside for questioning. Mikkelsen was then detained and taken to a separate room where officers searched his belongings, took his fingerprints, and even collected blood samples. Next, he was pressured to unlock his phone under threat of jail time or a $5,000 fine. What the officers found on his phone was shocking, and because of it, he was denied entry into the United States and returned to Norway. I hope you're sitting down. His crime? Seriously, I hope you're sitting down. And, I am no fan of anybody in the Trump regime, perhaps especially J.D. Vance, but even I took umbrage at the crime that was committed against him. Because you see, a photo on Mikkelsen's phone showed J.D. Vance depicted as a bald baby. Understandably, the story has shocked the world. It was even discussed on the floor of the Irish Parliament. Here is Irish lawmaker Ivana Bocic to explain.
Unthinkable in a Western democracy. This week, a young Norwegian tourist detained by ICE at Newark Airport and sent back to Oslo. Why? He had this meme on his phone, Minister. A meme depicting Vice President J.D. Vance as a baby. I mean, extraordinary. Extraordinary. That a young person with this amusing meme on their phone depicting a public person, that this would be used as an excuse to detain him for 5 hours and then deport him back to Oslo.
I have a question though, actually, because that's a meme. That looks exactly, that's how JD Vance actually looks. So I don't see the problem here. But in the event that it was meant to mock him in some way, this is a very serious offense. You cannot just walk around with baby JD Vance photos on your phone. You cannot. Not in a free country like America, not in a country that values free speech like America. No, you do not have the right to have baby JD Vance photos on your phone. And if you do, do not share these photos with anyone at any time for any reason, ever. Do not send them to every single person in your contacts list. Do not share them on social media sites like Twitter and Facebook. No, my friends, do not do these things, because we believe in the right of everybody in this country to be mocked mercilessly, except for baby JD Vance. Just kidding, of course, because that's what we're here for, to mock people like baby JD Vance. In fact, I think we should change his name legally to baby JD Vance. I think it rolls trippingly off the tongue. So, thank you, as always, for watching this week's episode of Trump Trolls Baby JD Vance. And thankfully, because these idiots keep doing idiotic things, we will be back next week for another episode in which somebody with the last name Trump trolls another person with that very same last name and anybody else associated with him. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you all next week. Bye.